How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, and I'm your host, Onrie Compan. I've decided to change my scenario around today because I'm a little tight on my schedule, and I want to relax a little bit because I got a great guest today, and I'm so eager to hear her story because she's extremely well established in the comic industry. She's a pioneer for female artists in the comic book industry as well. At least that's how I see it. Um, She's the artist of Beasts of Burden. She's done a wonderful Wonder Woman graphic novel and a whole slew of other things, including her own creator-owned property, Scary Godmother. She's going to talk to us about all of this stuff right now, and I'd like to welcome everyone, Jill Thompson, to the show. How you doing, Jill?
Hi, Onrie. Hi, everyone that is watching right now or later.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's a beautifully temperatured autumn day or late summer day here in Chicago, as you well know, and that is my favorite type of weather. So when I can be comfortable, I am very happy.
This is the best time of the year. I love fall. Why don't you do us all a favor? Tell us all who you are and what you do, and all that other wonderful stuff.
Okay, my name is Jill Thompson. I'm a writer, artist, and illustrator of comic books of every type. Um, I usually do all of my own everything, but I do collaborate with people. I am best known, I would say, probably for certain things in the comic industry, like working with Neil Gaiman on Sandman, working with Grant Morrison on The Invisibles, working with Will Pfeiffer on Finals, which is a thing we came up with together. My own creator-owned characters are the Scary Godmother and Magic Trixie. And also I am the co-creator of Beasts of Burden that is published by Dark Horse that Evan Dorkin writes. I guess I'm well known for that too. It's a very excellent series about some dogs and a cat that are the supernatural protectors of their neighborhood. So if you want to check all of these things out, they're easily and widely available at your favorite comic book shop, or I guess on some like Comixology or other online services. I like to see things in hard copy because I like to turn a page, and I mostly work in watercolor is my medium.
That's beautiful, and I've had the experience of enjoying many of your works. I really, really love what you did with Wonder Woman and Beasts of Burden as well.
Oh my God, I forgot Wonder Woman. Jeez, I won
Yeah.
the Eisner Award for that graphic novel. I guess because you just said it, I didn't say it again. So Wonder Woman, the True Amazon, is a graphic novel that I wrote and illustrated, and it won the Eisner Award in 2017 for Best Graphic Novel of the Year. Oops. I really need more people to read it, so I should probably have said it.
Well, Jill, let's go back a minute because one of the things that I find very interesting about you and I spoke at an event before, and when you were talking, I couldn't help but be taken by your story. So I wanted to go back to when you first started out in comics and kind of tell us a little bit about what originally got you into it and how you decided to break in and what you actually did to break in.
Okay, so you're talking about going all the way back of
All the way back.
liked comics type of thing?
We're hitting that rewind button. We're going all the way back to the beginning.
Okay. All right, well, growing up, I used to love, back in the day, there were these things called the newspaper, and there were comics in them. And in those comics, there was Peanuts, which was by Charles Schulz, which was the adventures of the very depressed Charlie Brown who needed some therapy, and the type of therapy he got was definitely not helping him because Lucy was a bad psychiatrist, and his dog Snoopy and all of the gang. But I loved that comic, and that was the first thing I ever tried to draw over and over again. And when my mom saw that I liked to draw that, she made the offhanded comment to me of, well, Jill, if you want to do a cartoon, the reason you get to see Snoopy is because somebody already draws him. So if you want to draw something, you should draw your own cartoon. And I don't think she was recommending that I went into comics or cartoons as a way of life. She was just telling me the reality. The reason you get to see all the things in the newspaper is somebody already draws them. So you personally won't be able to draw them. I see a look of concern on your face. Is there a sound issue?
No, I am totally listening to you. Please keep going.
Okay.
I was worried because the only reason why I was concerned, I was a little worried that the internet was cutting out, and
Okay.
that was it. But I am totally enthralled. Please continue. I am listening.
No problem. I
just make weird faces when I'm listening to my guests because, like, I'm actually listening. Please go ahead.
No, because I would stop to fix the technical difficulty.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so I started drawing technically a character that looked just like Snoopy, but it was called B-Dog, and it was, maybe I can draw it here. If I have something that'll show up on that's not going to wash out. Okay, I won't.
You know what? You
I'll
can
just do it like this.
do.
Okay, so
I don't know if you
letter B.
screen or not, but we can do like a here, Jill. I'm gonna try and just move real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. I'm worried. It's my fault because of the internet here. So we're gonna just try and move to a different location and see if that helps. Because I'm worried I'm losing. We're not catching all your words, or you may not be hearing me. I'm so sorry about this.
That's okay.
Here, we're gonna talk. We're gonna literally talk in my kitchen here. All right.
My kitchen's right behind.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right, now I think we should be fine with internet. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. How many bars do you have?
I'm full, and I've been full the whole time. But it was really weird because you were in the middle of talking, and then every other word started coming in, and I'm so sorry about that. That's my fault.
That's okay. I have full bars too.
Excellent.
I should be okay. But
so we were talking about. I don't know.
I think this is the second time I've worked on StreamYard, and it kind of had the same issue. And of course, somebody is working with a chainsaw or some kind of a thing up the back right now. Okay, so if you hear that more than you hear me,
actually, we hear you. We hear you perfectly.
Okay. All right. So I started to draw my own version of Snoopy, which was, and someone showed me how to do this. It might have been a friend of my dad's. So it was a capital letter B, and in the middle of the top part of the B, it had a little dot for the nose and a little eye, and then on the long straight back part of it, it had an ear like a Snoopy ear, and a little dot on the bottom part of the B, and a tail. And I called him, because I was very, very young, B-Dog, because that was the smartest thing to call him. And the whole comic was 4 panels, always the same thing. The first panel would be, there was an old man, like a grandpa and a grandma, and the grandpa would be sitting at the table at a dinner table with like a fork in one hand and a knife in the other, which I've never seen anyone do, but this is always shown in comics. Like, I'm ready to eat. Here are my weapons of eating. So she's putting down something in front of him, like the grandma's giving him like pancakes or a steak or spaghetti and meatballs or just some meal. It could be lunch, breakfast, dinner. It's just some meal is happening. And then in the background, we see B-Dog, and he spies the food. So that would be like the second. So he sees the food, and he's got one of those little like lines, like dots.
Yeah. Like,
food, so he knows where it is.
And
then the second panel would be him like throwing a rock or knocking something down. So there's a sound, and then the old man, of course, the third panel everyone looks the other way, and it leaves the plate completely empty, and then the dog's arm would come up, grab the food, and then the fourth panel would be the dog with the food in his mouth running away, and the old man chasing him, shaking a fist like old men never do, but do in cartoons. It was like, and go, B-Dog, ah! And he'd be
you know what you described just now in just your sequence here is like, you didn't just write this out. You didn't just come up with the story. What I saw coming through is how you saw it sequentially. Like, I saw all the little art details just through your expressions and through what you were telling me just now. And it's funny because, you know, like when I write, I just see the script and then, you know, I just kind of everything comes together. Like for you,
just see it in words.
Yeah, well, I do see it visually too, because I think you have to some degree. But the way you see it, the way you just described that strip, it was just so like I could see it already. I didn't need I would love to see the illustration, but the way you
done one somewhere in here in my in a folder of favorite art that I love and keep for a different book. I recreated one of them, except in my style now. So it's nice. Cool. But I forget what book it was for, but so it's a 4-panel page on watercolor paper, and it shows that same thing. I think I made the grandpa gets steak with baked potato. I love drawing food. That's a weird thing. Ever since I've been little, I like to draw food in my stories. There's always a scene of eating or baking or making food or something like that, whether it's in Scary Godmother or Magic Trixie. The Beast of Burden dogs haven't had a chance to eat anything yet, but oh my gosh, those poor dogs go through so much.
Yes, they do. They do go through.
I would love to give them all, you know, dog presents. You know, I told Evan Dorkin that could he please write a story that's a Christmas story where they all get, you know, dog sweaters and, you know, chew toys, or they all go to the beach or something and run around, and it's just fetching sticks and running in the water. And he was like, if I did that, there would have to be like a sea monster that would come out of the water, or like some evil thing would come down. I believe you could throw Krampus down the chimney, that would be okay. But as long as at the end they got toys or something like that, because I want them to have something. Like, and I want the orphan to come inside and like get to sleep inside a warm place. Because if it was me, like if I knew I could afford it, I would have all of the animals. I would go to the rescue place and rescue all the animals. And then you would never see comics from me again, because all I would be doing is cleaning up animals and feeding them and cleaning litter boxes and taking dogs on walks, because I like animals too much.
Well, you know, there was something my grandfather once told me that this Russian general said, and it's that every person should love and appreciate animals because they are truly innocent. They're not capable of the same kind of evils we are. So, well, you know, at least that's the way we see it, right? As humans, you know, we all know how evil cats can be to each other. But regardless, you know, I'm with you on that. You know, all animals are born into this world like, you know, innocent of the things that
animals have been shown to do vicious things, right? I mean, it's a predatory circle of how the natural world lives. But like, there are no, unless there's some chimpanzees I've not heard about, there's like no serial killing animals.
Yeah.
I know cats kill for fun. So cats are the closest we've got to just like deadly murder.
Well, they're hunters though. That's like their nature. Like they have to go and like hunt something and kill it. You know, it's like that.
They get bored. I mean, like they've made an arrangement with us. And I've read an article that cats domesticated themselves. Like dogs were kind of brought in and domesticated. It was like a choice of humans to do this, but cats kind of saw a good opportunity and were like, I might hang around these people because there's food there. The same way that they also say that all the noises we hear cats make, chirping and meowing and stuff like that, they don't make in the wild to each other at all. It's they've learned language to try and communicate with us, because obviously living with humans can be advantageous. Back in the day, it's like we keep the mice away and then they, you know, let us stay in this warm area. Or now, I mean,
they let us do what we want, and when we ask them to do something, or when they ask us to do something, we just pretend we don't know what they're talking about.
But yeah, they're
Well, that, you know what I find interesting about that, bringing that back to your work, is it really much so is a part of your work. Like Beasts of Burden is about animals that protect their neighborhoods, and what, you know, when we go off to work and we go off to do our things, what are these animals doing? You know, and I read another article that said that this was a long time ago, that cats actually don't sleep as much as we think that they do. Like we think that all they do is just sleep all day, and I'm sure there are some that do, but there are also cats that
my cat Maximo sleeps most of the day.
he sleeps most of the day. Well, I think as they get older too, you know, that's kind of what it tends to happen. It's like they get kind of used to it when they're like little kittens. They like to run around and, you know, scratch stuff. And, you know, my cat, she used to take, I'd take out the garbage, but I didn't actually take it out, just let the bag there. She would actually like grab it with her teeth and pull the entire garbage bag. And she's like this tiny little cat, and she's like this big garbage.
Yeah, I mean, both my cats have really great personalities, completely different. But also, if you think about it, actually, COVID made me realize, you know, and being quarantined and taking quarantine seriously and being strict about it, it's like people started going crazy, right? You know, going out with their giant guns and demanding that the Chili's and their hair salon get opened up because they needed to get this done. And I thought about, you know, like, well, I'm not enjoying myself. It's not very much different than my regular freelance life as far as, you know, like what I do every day. Other people had a bigger learning curve. But I know I get stir crazy doing the same routine every day, and I go out and have my classes that I take or do physical exercises, do Spartan training and sword fighting and stuff like that.
You do sword fighting?
Yeah.
That is so fucking cool.
Well, I haven't picked up a sword in like 9 months, so I doubt my
who else gets to say that? Like, yeah,
my novice skills are even more novice-like, right?
What kind of sword? I
did learn how to crack a whip last weekend, so that was really good. There's but what I was saying is, like, if you think about how pent up we got, I think about I've taken a different look at my cats. I was like, they're always in quarantine. We think, oh, you have a lovely house to live in, but they're like constantly looking out the window, like, look at all those delicious birds I could be eating right now, and no one will let me out to get them.
Or just like breathing in the fresh air.
I try and make their lovely imprisonment as comfortable as possible. I bring them out on leashes in the little back patio, so they can, you know, have a little bit of the world, which is kind of exactly what I'm doing too. It's like I go on my back patio, I stay away from people, I ride my bike with my mask on, I do things completely distanced, but it's like the cats don't even have that aspect. Dogs at least get to go for a walk. The cats don't have that. So I try and treat them nicer because I know they must be pent up with murderous rage they're never able to get rid of.
I wonder,
natural instinct is to kill and chase something. So I realize they must be bored out of their minds. My cat Oberon loves this screen. If I don't have the iPad on, because I usually listen to podcasts or, you know, stream shows or something like that, he'll come over to it and he'll just start scratching at the screen if it's not on. And I was like, oh, dude, you want your show? Okay. Because I think he likes to have the noise. And sometimes he'll sit and watch things with me. Like he'll sit down and be like, what are we watching? Last night we watched the Princess Bride reading, like the live reading of the Princess Bride by the original cast. And he sat down, he was staring at the screen. Mandy Patinkin was tearing up the scenery with all of his line readings, and I believe Oberon was watching him. It was great.
So I wonder, going back now, because where we started was, you know, kind of where you started, and you were telling us you put together these strips. But I like that we diverged a little bit because I'm curious to know. Now that I know this about you, you seem like a very considerate person, who doesn't just see things from her own point of view, but from the point of view of all living things and, you know, other people. So I wonder, how does how does this kind of, I wonder if your experiences in comics that got you to where you are now somehow helped you learn these lessons, or if maybe you were just born with these kinds of traits, and that's what also may have helped you along the way.
Well, I hope I was born with these type of traits, but I know that a lot of times in my life when I had really bad things happen, or really stressful or bad childhood experiences happen, I know other people have turned to, like drinking or drugs or whatever, but comics are where I was already interested in. So I dove deeper into comics. One, I mean, by the time I was 13, I knew what I wanted to do for a living, and I wanted to draw comics. Up until that point, I mean, even maybe before that, I had wanted to do a bunch of things. I wanted to be a veterinarian and an archaeologist and a paleontologist and an actress and any cool thing that I saw, and all of those things kept falling away. I think I wanted to be a ballerina at one time, and I was not built to be a ballerina at all, and or a gymnast. And I used to be able to do some great tumbling things when I was younger, and then suddenly, like, all the parts of me that were cartilage, like, calcified. So I used to be more bendy, and then suddenly one day I went to, like, oh, let me do a back bend. It's like, oh, it doesn't go that way anymore. It's like, what's happening? And so one by one, the conglomerate of careers that I wished that I could do fell away until comic book artist was the only one left. So because I never stopped liking comics, so this is my timeline. I went from Peanuts to Archie comics, and because down the block from me there was a house that was moving, and they were having a moving house sale, but it didn't mean that the people were moving out of the house. It meant that the village of Forest Park, just west here of me here, they were building a municipal parking lot 2 houses down from me. So I guess they bought up the land or they did something, but both the houses got picked up and moved, put on a truck, and moved across town to a different place. So the people that lived in them were selling everything in their house. And I went to, look at the people's houses, and also, I think I obviously had a little bit of money on me, but there was an old orange crate filled with old comic books, and they were all old Archie comics. And I had already liked to draw, and I liked to draw stuff from the newspaper, and I liked to read the compilations of Peanuts comics that were in those little pocket books. And whoever's house it was, they let me buy this, box of comics for like $1 or something. And I went home, and it had comics from the 1940s, some of the very first Archie comics in there. They were all beat up and stuff. One of them didn't even have a cover, but it didn't matter because it was the story and the art I liked. And I got hooked on artists that I now know as Harry Lucy and Dan DiCarlo, and Sam Schwartz. So these classic Archie artists who I felt Archie comics shaped a lot of how I looked at the world for a long time. Just based on what I would expect high school was like. It was going to be like an Archie comic, and it was not like an Archie comic. But I also felt like I learned how to wear an outfit based on the fashion of the 1950s Betty and Veronica's and Sabrina, probably, and Josie and the Pussycats. I don't walk around just wearing a leopard print leotard, but I do love my cheetah print, and I do love a leopard print. And then after reading Archie comics, I jumped to Marvel comics, to superhero comics, things that I used to think were scary. My dad saw that I liked comics, so he would bring comics home from work. He worked downtown, and there was a newsstand near him, and on Fridays he would go to visit the newsstand, and he'd pick up new comics for me. And I knew if he came home with like a green like a green paper bag under his arm. He'd been to the newsstand, and that after dinner I would get comics. And sometimes they didn't have new Archies because this was before comic book shops and the direct market. So whatever they had, my dad would just go and pick what was new or different. And a couple of times he picked some, or I think there was a bin of old comics there too, because he picked up stuff for me that was like from the early 70s and stuff, and then other things. So like a lot of things didn't have they weren't in order of any type. But
what was your first Marvel comic, and like what?
It was probably I remember a Thor comic, but also I remember like a Spider-Man. Like I got hooked on Spider-Man right away, and the way it went was like my brother and I used to come home for lunch from our grade school. It was fairly close to our house, and we'd walk home for lunch. And my grandmother was at home, and she made lunch for us. But we would eat lunch while reading comics, and we had just like this one box of the comics that I had gotten, and some of the comics that my dad had gotten. And so you'd read what was on the top of the pile. But it got to me that we read them so many times, we could just look at the cover and we knew every story in there. Like it wasn't like reading a new comic anymore. It was so kind of, boring to us. So if you reached down to the bottom of the box, it was something you hadn't read in a while. So then it was almost like a new comic. But my dad would throw the comics that I didn't read in there too. So I remember one time having looked through that whole box, and I pulled out what I considered a scary comic, because it was, two guys either beating the crap out of each other or somebody laying there like they were going to be killed and a villain hanging over them like, is this the end of Spider-Man? Or something like that. Craven the Hunter, finally I've killed him,
that's all the issues though, but that's what was so great about it, was the fact that, this stuff kept you wanting to come back. And or it made you like, it literally grabbed you by the throat and said, you have to read this. Well, you have to see what happens.
Totally. And a lot of times whatever was going on the cover of that comic was not what was happening on the inside of the comic.
Yes.
So it's like you pick it up and, it was kind of similar, but not necessarily so much. And so I picked that up, and because I was bored of the other ones, decided I was going to read this. And it's all soap opera, and it's all drama, and Peter Parker is easy to jump like into as far as, being a character you can relate to. And so I started really liking that. So then I started to really want more comics. And I noticed at one point there was like comics at the drugstore, I think. And so I would go and buy anything that they had that was, like any comic that was on the spinner rack. And then one day my dad happened to ride by Rick's One Stop Comics, which was a time.
Oh man, that's the best shop. Is it still open?
Oh, I think it is, but I'm saying like Rick was like this teenage guy. He was this teenage guy that had it was on Oak Park Avenue in Oak Park, Illinois. And he took me over there because it was like he had a handmade sign, and it was in the side of a like a shoe repair shop. He just rented like a corner where he had like some racks and like a little desk thing or whatever, and he was selling. He may have sold like a personal collection and then just started getting new comics because he had a bunch of boxes there, and it smelled like a shoe repair shop.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to babysit for like some of the kids in the neighborhood, and I would end up on Saturday mornings, I would take all my babysitting money and I would ride my bike over to Rick's One Stop Comics exactly when it opened, and I would get whatever I could. And I think the first thing I picked up was like a back issue of an old X-Men comic. And it happened to be, I believe it was X-Men 129, Run for Your Life, Kitty Pryde. It was in the middle of the Dark Phoenix saga. So like I went from going in the middle of, Spider-Man drama, which there was plenty, but in the middle of, I opened up a comic where there was a 13-year-old girl who lived right outside the city of Chicago, which was just like me, with curly hair, running away from evil guys that wanted to run her down in a car. And then Phoenix like drops out of the sky and telekinetically destroys the car. And Kitty Pryde has powers. And then they run away from the Hellfire Club. And then Kitty Pryde ends up going to save, and everything is told with flashbacks. And there's always the little caption boxes that have what it referring to. In case you missed it, it'll give you all the updates. And even in the beginning, it was always like face front, true believer. Here we had, it was like a recap all the time. It was very perfect for jumping into something, especially something like that. And once I got that comic, it wasn't so much that I loved comics, but I started to love, I knew I wanted to collect them, and I knew what I wanted to do. And John Byrne was my favorite artist, John Byrne and Terry Austin. And I would go now and try and track down all of the issues, and all of my babysitting money started to be spent on not just buying new comics that came out, it was completing a run. So sometimes all my money went to one comic, and then I, had them all.
You are so cool. I wish with you. I would have totally been friends with you. Like, I think it's so cool because,
Oh my God, nobody was into comics at the time.
Nobody was into comics when we were growing up. I mean, it was like, now they act like it because the comics are so popular now, and they're like, oh yeah. And my kid's growing up and he's being encouraged in school to read comics and graphic novels and stuff. And I'm like, dude, if it was like that for us, I would have had like straight A's all the time because I was
a very good student. I loved school. And but I think school is a lot different. Here's my weird thing. I like doing well. My childhood trauma makes me a people pleaser. So I like to do the best job, and I like people to, it's not praise, but I like to know that I've done it right.
You've done your part. Yeah.
I've done it right.
Yeah, I feel the same.
When I collaborate with somebody, I want to, the comic, your collaboration, the final comic is the star, but I try really hard to make sure that I'm doing the best to tell the best version of what I'm reading from a writer, And you had talked about that. I'm so sorry. I don't. Please don't look at it as me cutting up. I remember this came from you or somebody who was referencing you, that it's one thing to write 300 men storming a castle and another thing completely to draw it. So go on. I just wanted to throw that. Well, you said that 300 men are storming a castle. You go to the next page, right? He's like, that's your page right there. And now I'm like, okay, what kind of a castle? Here's one, like in Germany, it's that storybook one that's on top of the mountain. Oh, it's also on top of a mountain. Great. Let me see. Oh, wait, 300 guys? What are they wearing? Oh, all armor? We can see them fight. Oh, yeah. It's like, and you're laying that out, and you're putting in perspective, and you're trying to make sure everything, fits right. That's a, really fast artist. That might be the full day, but for me, that's a couple of days of doing that type of thing. But I want to do the best job. I want to make it look cool. No cheating, no, it's like, that's an impressive thing. If you're opening up on a page of, guys storming a castle, it should be something that draws the reader in. You should know what's going on in that. I mean, obviously it would be a battle, but you want to get a sense of, based on the castle, oh, this is a historical thing, or this is a complete fantasy because, like, maybe there's unicorns around or something like that. But or this might be like some space castle. It's like, because of the architecture that's involved. There's a lot of ways you can tell the story without any of the reader having to look at any caption or word balloons right there, whether or not it's a big fight scene like that or any other action that happens, whether it's very quiet scene or, something that is well established already. You know, characters people know. Because your job as an artist is to make sure that everybody, regardless of what language they speak, get a good idea of the gist of that story without having to then refer back to what's being said or what captions are saying.
You know what I like about what you're saying in general is the fact that it sounds to me like you believe that it's about the story. It's not about what hangups you have personally. It's not about how you feel about the writer or something that he's putting out there. It's about getting you see you got a job. You want to make it the best you can so that because the comic is the spotlight. That's what people are going to see at the end of the day. They don't care about your drama. They don't care about any other crap you got going on in your life. They only care about that comic when they pick it up.
Oh, right. But that's not saying that I would work with anybody.
Of course.
Because there's some stories
sounds like you're very selective as well.
I would read if I read a script, I would be like, I personally can't, in good conscience, illustrate the story that has this message.
Right? Yeah, right. But when you went to Marvel, it's kind of like
my. You mean when I started to like Marvel comics?
Yeah. Well, you worked there, right? I mean, you've done some stuff.
I have worked there, but I got the most rejection letters from Marvel. They're really nice ones because they were all form letters. You know, back in the day, I used to send things. You know, I had no idea how comics were made, so I would send loose leaf notebook paper comics that I had drawn with ballpoint pen or some other lame thing or a marker and stuff with like bad lettering, and fold it up and send it in a bigger envelope thinking that was going to get somebody's attention. But I started to notice the different jobs that, there was a writer, there was a penciler, there was an inker, and it was described, Stan Lee style, what they did. And I knew one person drew it and another person wrote it, or sometimes one guy wrote and drew it. But you could, I wanted to work there. I wanted to work there really bad. So I would send them submissions all the time and sometimes forget about it. And I would get letters back that were in, like an envelope with Marvel stationery, and it had like Spider-Man on the back of it. And DC they had that too, because they had DC bullet logo, but on the back they had, the Justice League faces all on the back of their envelope. So the Marvel rejection letter was, hey, true believer, thanks so much for wanting to work for the mighty Marvel bullpen. If you want to be one of, like Jumpin' Johnny Romita or Smiling Stan Lee or Big John Buscema.
Jackson Kirby, yeah. Those are little nicknames.
These are the things you're going to have to learn how to do. And then it was just like a checklist. It's like, learn to draw the human figure, learn to draw cars and objects, learn to put things in perspective, learn to and they would just check off all the crap you didn't know how to do.
That's great, though.
And then, send that back to you. It's like, thanks so much. It's like, we know you're, it's like a true Marvel believer or whatever. And I got a bunch of those. And I never figured, gee, I'm never going to be able to do this because I got a rejection letter. I don't even know if it ever got any smaller. I just figured once I figure out how to draw all these things, I'm in. I've got it.
Again, getting in there, I would think that when you're working at a company like Marvel or DC, you don't really have the kind of freedom to decide who you're collaborating with. You can certainly turn down work, but in the cases of, let's say most of the time you're not really talking to the writers anyway, are you? I mean, what was
my very first jobs at one of the big two companies was for DC Comics, and I worked on Wonder Woman. And the way that happened was I had been working on other things for other companies. I'd worked for First Comics and had collaborated with Craig Russell. I had actually taken over the Chronicles of Corum from Mike Mignola, who had done like the first arc of that, and I like totally fell in love with Mike's art. But then I ended up drawing, and it was the first time I inked anything I did, I think. and I penciled and inked the next couple. The Bull and the Spear was my arc on that, and I had worked for Kamiko back in the day on the Elementals by Bill Willingham and Fathom by Bill Willingham, and I was like still in art school when I was working on some of that stuff. But so that was, technically my resume. And then I ended up moving away from Chicago over to the Cleveland, Ohio area, Kent, Ohio specifically. And I moved in with my boyfriend, and I was working on some stuff. And on the way back from a convention in Michigan or Detroit, I think Detroit, Michigan, Evan Dorkin and Robbie Bush, who was coloring Sandman at the time, they came and stopped at our house halfway, stayed over. We all, had like big comic book fun night where we all had dinner and drank and told convention stories and stuff like that. And then, like comic book artists would do back in the day, was like, what are you working on? And you'd haul out some like Xeroxes or some art you were working on and show each other. And I didn't have any work at the time. I had just finished up the Scarlet Letter for First Comics, which was like my first painted comic. And I was looking for work. I think I'd been working for a rubber stamp company at that point, like just illustrating these tiny little illustrations for rubber stamps for like $10 the illustration, doing hundreds of them.
How'd you get that job?
My friend Rick Taylor knew a guy that had a little rubber stamp company, and he paid piece by piece as he made rubber stamps that he then sold.
Cool.
And Rick Taylor ended up working. He was a production manager at DC for a while. Well, not a while, like a decade. And but so anyway, back Evan and Robbie were then gonna head out, and Robbie mentioned, he was like, oh, I have to turn some pages in on Sandman that he was coloring to Karen Berger. He goes, I think she's looking for someone to draw Wonder Woman. You ever want to draw that? And I was like, I've never read a Wonder Woman comic in my life.
Really? At that point, you had never read a Wonder Woman comic?
Nah.
Really?
I would, tried it. I looked at them. They were bored the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I think it was like at the time when, like the things that I had seen or grabbed off the rack, or even if it was like in an old back issue. I mean, I knew Wonder Woman. I didn't think she was a bad character, but I knew her from TV. And I twirled around and wanted to be Wonder Woman, like you did the...
Yeah.
And then the costume would come on, and you'd play Wonder Woman all the time, but I never read her comics. I knew I could recognize her anywhere. She was also on Super Friends. That was okay. But like anytime I would find a comic, it would be like, hey, here's a new Wonder Woman. And it was like they got rid of her costume. And it's like, she's Diana Prince. And she's all looking like Emma Peel, but not being Emma Peel. And it just wasn't the X-Men or Spider-Man to me. And but being a working artist, I said, sure, I'd love to draw Wonder Woman. And he goes, well, I'll tell her you're going to send in some samples and you should look for them. So then I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything about it. And I was in an improv troupe at the time. So I went to my improv gig, and my one friend, Troy Tinker, was a big Wonder Woman fan and a comic book fan. And he was collecting comics. And I said, I need to borrow some so I know what's going on. He goes, oh my God, you would love, there's a new George Perez run on Wonder Woman. You would really love it. And I go, oh my God, I love George Perez. I love the Teen Titans. This would be great. So he loaned me George's stuff. I read it and I was like, oh great, I can do this. So I, made up a couple of pages of Wonder Woman for it, sent it in to Karen Berger, and like a week later she called me back and asked me if I wanted to, could I do some samples from a script. So she sent me a page of script and or a couple of pages of script, and she paid me for it, which was remarkable. I had to be paid to do samples was an amazing thing. And after I sent those in, she offered me a job as penciling Wonder Woman. And that was that was huge, huge
Of
deal.
course it is. That's a big that's a major book. That's not
Yeah,
like
and I started out on like a very important issue because it was like when it was a anti-suicide issue. Wonder Woman's friend, like Vanessa,
that's a message anybody can get.
yeah, Vanessa Capitalis's friend had killed herself. Like the popular girl in school had killed herself, and it was a very daunting issue to try and illustrate. I think also because it was all low key. It was funeral, and it was low key, but it was also George Perez. So sometimes you'd have like 19 panels on a page, and stuff like that. And it was Wonder Woman trying to figure out like why would this bright, wonderful person take her own life, and nobody could understand. And so it started out being all of the things that I like to draw, which was, emotion, and I like to make characters act, and I like to do subtle things with them. And this also rolls back into the thing where you said when you work at a major comic book company, you don't get to choose who you work with. So yes, I got to work with one of my favorite art heroes, George Perez, on a script, but he was working on, I think, Marvel, and he was working on War of the Gods and maybe another Marvel thing at the same time. So he was like completely incommunicado on, so I never actually spoke to him. And the inker was just someone that would be better suited on someone else, which happened to me a lot when I ended up penciling nearly anything I had worked on before. They're always really great artists, but our styles really didn't go well together.
Yeah.
So I started to learn how to ink myself just to get around that, because it started to be really frustrating because I would spend a lot of time trying to make these like subtle things happen in the pencils, and then I would see what was printed, and it didn't look like what I had sent in.
Well, here's a technical question for you, because the one thing I notice working with artists is that when they provide the layouts, everything's very loose, and everything just constantly gets more static as you move on through the process. Like you get the pencils and you get your inks, and that's very like solid, like static figures. They're not moving. I mean, they can have motion lines and all that stuff, but the one thing I would notice about your Wonder Woman graphic novel is you obviously watercolored everything. So did you ink that book, or did you just go from pencils to watercolors?
None of my watercolors have any ink on them at all.
Yeah,
like, I'll show you. I'll see if you can see something here. This is on my table at this time. So like this is Scary Godmother.
Yeah, I see that. Perfect.
And whatever color that's on the inside of it is what the outside line is. So the outside line of her skin, because she has a greenish tinge, it's a green painted line. Her hair would have orange. The outside of the hat is purple. Only thing that would have black on it would be the black of her, anything that's black. These pumpkins down here, the line around them is like, it's a mixture of things. So it's like a burnt sienna and a Chinese orange, and then like a little violet.
Can you lift it up just a little bit, because we're seeing the bottom of it? Yeah, that's perfect.
Right, sorry, that's my
No,
name. So yeah, there's no ink line around it. Sometimes I've taken a shortcut when I'm doing certain illustrations, and I'll ink the line and then I'll paint over it. But I find the paint goes over the ink, and it makes it kind of chalky looking. And I'm not good at staying. I'm not good at staying in the lines, so I have to paint everything and then do the lining, the outline afterwards. I
love your work.
It's much more laborious, and it's with anything. I mean, like it's with Beast of Burden or anything you'll see that I paint is like that, unless it's some of these little paintings that I post that look more like traditional watercolor paintings. So Mike Mignola once said that I illustrate, or it's like I draw comics with paint is what my style is. And he's right. That's pretty much what I do.
I just love it.
It's not painting like Alex Ross. It's not painting like Esad Ribic. It's not painting like any person that's, doing these, like, or Mark Brooks or Adi Granoff or anything like that.
It's its own
It's
thing.
it's more cartoony.
I wouldn't even say it's cartoony because I used a similar style for the first and last chapters of the book about my grandfather's life, Mark's, because I think it gives, yes, it definitely has the fairy tale feel to it, but it works so beautifully. I mean, you just have such a great sense of color composition with everything that you're doing on all of your work. I am just so blown away by it that literally the only thing I can see when I look at it is that I love it. It's such great stuff, and I really love
I
Wonder Woman too.
Thanks so much. I mean, all of everything that I teach or anything I'll tell anyone that comes up to me at a convention and shows me their art are all the lessons that I learned from going to the American Academy of Art. I'm a graduate. Alex Ross is a graduate. Bill Reinhold, Mitch O'Connell. Those are the comic book artists. But there are so many people I know that are amazing fine artists or other visual artists. And J. Anthony Kozar went there. So, I mean, like, special effects artist, but that's one of the things he does, but he's also an amazing illustrator. So all of the lessons that I learned there, I applied to comics, which I believe everyone should do because it's learning about design, learning about color theory, learning about perspective, anatomy. I took photography there, so even there you're dealing with composition and value when you're working in black and white photography. I was very bad at developing photographs. I would blow through so much paper. So hard to do. But I apply all of that when I'm creating a comic book page, whether it's a full page illustration or panel to panel sequences, because I feel when you're creating something that happens on a page turning panel, because it would be different if I was scrolling. There's, you take into account so many things before you start drawing. Like you read the script and you're like, the first panel says, whatever the action happens to be. So I have to figure out what's the best and most interesting way to show that gets all the information the writer has asked to be in there. But then you read, it's okay. The first thing you do is you read through the script several times. Then you can highlight things like characters that are important. And you can create character design or locations. If you have to, pardon?
Do you print up your scripts when you're reading them? I'm
yes.
sorry. Yeah. Okay. So you actually print them up. Okay.
All the time because I scribble all over them. I do a lot of my layouts and scribbling design on there, and then I write stuff down that I think of while I'm reading it, and then I look up reference, and then I save all that reference on my phone if I need photo reference for something. But yeah, I do print it out, and because I get lost a lot of times if I just have to scroll through it, and it helps my brain personally. I know everyone has a different way that they remember stuff, but that helps me. So not only do you have to figure out how, whatever is the best layout for that panel, you also have to first figure out what's the best layout for that page. What's the most important action on that page? Where are we putting our focus? Are you leading up to that moment, or are you leading away from it? Or are you waiting and then the page turn is the most important moment that's going to happen? So it's like, how do you build tension? How do you convey the action? But also then you have to figure out where characters are placed based on what their dialogue is. Because sometimes when people are writing, they're just thinking, because they can hear the dialogue in their head. They forget that there has to be a left to right way that you read the word balloons. You can't have overlapping tails, and you want to make sure that all of the dialogue fits and it doesn't cover up important stuff. So I lay out my own lettering too, as well as, try and design my page. So I want not only, I want to make sure that I control the way the reader's eye flows and where it's going to stop. And then also every time there's a word balloon that stops you from your natural flow on the page. So you're kind of orchestrating all of those things, including drawing it well, making sure there are great backgrounds so people understand where your location is and they don't have to guess what's going on, and also that, all of the acting is clear, and the action itself is clear, and there's a lot of planning that goes into every single thing that you read, and that's what differentiates a good comic from a bad comic, in my estimation, or a comic where I shouldn't have to ask a lot of questions to know what's going on, or I shouldn't have to read the dialogue to figure out what's happening on the page. And I see that happen a lot of times.
And what's interesting about it is it's not necessarily the fault of the writer or the artist. It's how it comes across sometimes. And, I often find that, like, when I'm free.
It's the artist's fault if they're being lazy and they're not going to draw.
Well,
like you said, I want an army of 300 guys fighting.
It's not an army of 150 guys.
And there's like guys fighting, and then in the background there's just like a small castle shape that's filled in black. That's not a dynamic splash page.
No, yeah, you're right.
A guy that doesn't want to draw backgrounds, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is, I've read scripts where it's like all the details are there, and then you see the artwork, and the artwork is just like empty, and then there's all this space for like dialogue that just kind of goes on and on forever, and it's like kind of like some of those older comics, but it's more like you're telling rather than showing. And I think there's a fine balance, especially with the way that comics have evolved over the years, where you have to have a sense of knowing what to show and what to tell.
It's show, don't tell first. And what's told should be really important, because you can write some incredibly snappy dialogue, but you have such limited real estate on that page. So if you're writing a script for a TV show, you can have guys saying a million things while he's doing a lot of stuff, and it doesn't get in the way of what he's doing. But when you're writing for a comic page, you start having that guy talk. You start covering up important things, whether or not you want to. And so you have to really be, I think, judicious with what you have the characters say. It should all be important. It can be very snappy. It can be wonderful. Hold on. Overon, what did you just knock over?
Yeah. He has something he wants to add to the conversation as well.
Yeah. No, I had some things on a chair, and he went to jump on the chair, and they all fell down. That's my fault. So, you can show a lot of what's happening without having people talk like I do nonstop. So
actually, I really love it. And because we had a little bit of a blip with when you first got on the show, I'm gonna make time for one more question for you, because I'm so enthralled with everything.
I can be your longest interview on.
I would love to. Honestly, if I had all afternoon, Jill, I would love to pick your brain, because the thing too about it is I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface, because behind all this creativity, and you've shared just a little bit of your mastery of comics with us, your knowledge, but you also understand it very well from the business standpoint. And just seeing what you've done with Scary Godmother, seeing what you're doing with all of your properties, and also just in general, like, you've made this really beautiful career for yourself, not because of the people but because of the work that you've done. And
I've been really fortunate to collaborate with incredible people, and to come up in comics at a time when it was a lot more connected and personable.
Really? I would think it would have been harder at that time, because it was like,
I don't know, we had this thing called a telephone, and it was a phone.
There's no internet then.
Dialed on it. Well, I'm very much more connected to thousands of people all over the world now. I wouldn't say that helps me get anything done. But when I got to meet people, there were, it was, I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but when I went to a convention before, when I got, like, the fact that I was one of the only women there at all, first starting out as one of the only girls there at all, I was the only girl there. And then when I became a teenager, I was one of the only teenage girls there. And eventually, I mean, in a way, it helped me get noticed by anybody that was actually working in a representative state, because I swear to God, there were times that there were people that said, "Oh, hey, have you talked to that girl that wants to draw comics?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Oh, the girl that wants to draw comics. You've seen her. She has a portfolio."
Put out. I get it.
And they're like, "Oh, do you mean one of the bespectacled gentlemen with a beard and mustache and a flannel shirt?" No, we mean the girl. And they're like, "Oh, yes, I have seen the girl." And so even if I wasn't as good as I could have been at the time, or I needed to learn a lot more, I remember talking to Bill Sienkiewicz once. He took time out of a Chicago Con convention, and we went over to the little hotel cafe that was attached to the convention, because it was just like the ballroom areas of like a hotel out by the airport.
Yeah.
And so but to look at my portfolio, and he looked at it was all the stuff that I've been doing in art school, and it was my watercolors, and he gave me painting tips, and it was really nice. And after it was done, went back to the convention. He went back to his table. I went and bought some comics. I went to talk to other artists to look to see if I could have some tips. But it was possible to talk to people in a way that it's not possible to do now, like, because things are bigger and everything's more hectic. And I mean, this is even before Hollywood got involved, just when things got bigger, your time was not, like, as accessible to other people. If someone came up to talk with you, I try and talk to everybody that comes to my table, and I hope more people would just kind of gather around. So, because I still try and draw or do something while I meet people. So I want them to be entertained. I don't want anyone to feel like they can't ask me anything, or that they're just getting a signature and rushed away. Sometimes that's what people expect. They just like, "Can you sign this?" And then I sign it, and then they go away. But if you want to talk about something, I'm more than happy to talk, because that's the type of experience I had when I was coming to conventions. Like, Bill Reinhold is the reason that I went to the American Academy of Art. He was a person who took time to look at my portfolio when I was coming around while I was still in high school, and he looked at my crappy drawings, and he started pointing out what was wrong with them, but not in a way that made me feel bad, in a way that made me want to go home and fix it and then come back and show him that I did it right. And then I learned what he said. And then he suggested, he's like, "Don't look at comics to learn how to draw comics." He said, "Go to art school, learn everything that they've got to teach you, and apply it to comics, because you already know how comics works, because you read comics and you love comics. And I see you already making, you know how panel to panel works, you know how the action breaks down, you understand the language of comics." He goes, "But learn about the things that will help your language be a beautiful language instead of a very ugly language."
That is so well said, and I mean, you have achieved that in all of your work. I mean,
I've always been a good student, so I was like, he is the expert. Bill knows what he does. Where did he go? He went to the American Academy of Art. I'm going to go there too. And
there you go. That was the right. I should have gotten on that same bandwagon.
Oh my God, I blew off my SATs. I just kind of like.
I did too. Yeah, I didn't.
I
took my SATs.
I'm not a math person, so even at the beginning, like I knew all the English stuff. Like the English, I probably scored really well, but I didn't take. My brain doesn't absorb advanced mathematics. I struggled like crazy in high school with algebra. I had a very patient nun who was really trying to help me. Two very wonderful nuns that tried to help me knowing that I could not, like for some reason, this was not working for me. So Sister Aquanata was my algebra teacher in my freshman year. And then I had geometry my sophomore year. And the nun there, I don't remember her name, but I remember she made me feel very bad about myself. And she told me, why wasn't I getting this? It was like drawing because you had to make triangles. So I should be able to understand it. I'm like, no. That's the wrong side of the brain. And then my third year, I ended up taking a very hard chemistry class, which you needed advanced mathematics to understand. So I should have been knowing what trigonometry was all about. And I'm still like, I'm trying to add things together to make this equation work. And that's not how this chemistry is going. She also had a lot of compassion for me. So once I decided I was going to go to art school, and there was no math involved there whatsoever, when it came to the SATs, I knew I wasn't going to a 4-year, college, state college type of deal. I was going to go downtown to the American Academy of Art if I got in. And once I got accepted, and I just was filling in any circle just because they told you don't leave one blank. And, if it wasn't a very simple math problem, it was just fill something in. And I know that if you looked at my SAT scores, I must look like a moron. So, but I did not focus on that at all.
You see the complete opposite. Jill, I hate to do this. We gotta cut it out here. Do us a favor though, before we end this episode, can you tell us where we can find you if we want to support you and throw money in your direction? Where is the best place to do it?
Well, I started a Patreon that I have not updated yet because I've only updated it once, because it's yet another thing that I'm trying to do. So if you really want to follow me and keep everything really, really current, my Instagram is @TheJillThompson. And that's where I am most of the time, posting art and any information that might hook you to something else that you might want to find me at. I'm also on Facebook, but I might be at my limit of friends. So Instagram is the best place to find me. And then I have a website, which is www.thescarygodmother.com, and that's to sell things like my doll or pins and patches and things like that you might get at a convention. But since there aren't any conventions, that would be the place to get it.
Well, I really hope that I will see you on the convention fronts again next year when everything is hopefully on the course back to some sort of normalcy.
Boy, I hope so.
And I want to thank
science, wins.
Yes, I hope science wins on this one too. And I want to thank you also, Jill, for taking time out of your schedule. I know how busy you are and how much work you put into everything you're doing. Thank you again so much. It's such an honor to speak to someone, such a great craftsman.
Well, make some more questions and get me back on.
I will.
I'm more
Absolutely.
than happy to come back on. It actually energizes me to make comic pages.
You know what? If I can have even a small fraction of, to be able to inspire you in just a little tiny way, I'll take it. I do plan on having like a round table at some point, and I would love to have you on there as well. So I will definitely reach out to you. And thank you again so much for being with us.
More guests to you.
Yes, please do, Jill. Please do. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. What a great episode and what a fantastic guest, Jill Thompson. She is the bomb. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'll be back tomorrow in my regular background setup, and I can't wait to see you guys. I will see you then. And until that time comes, onward to victory.